Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you very much for joining me for the latest 8th edition Newsflash, and today's date is the 8th of May 2017. So this is a 2-in-1. So the Games Workshop people have done the same thing, and they've released 2 articles today on the new 8th edition rules, one dated yesterday, which was on large models, and one dated today on infantry, but they were both released today. So I've bundled them up into one delicious update. Right, well, let's deal with the burning question of graphics. So I've stuck with all the high quality and much admired features that we've already accumulated, but I've added something extra special today. And you can see, much like a Horus Heresy Forge-Walled Black Book, I've added these high quality corner eagles to our information whiteboard. And, you know, if I don't say so myself, they look quite handsome. I mean, clearly these are a bit of grey marker and some white paper, so they're not as high quality as what you get with the black books. However, and this is important, you can't injure yourself on these, you know, and have to go to casualty or the emergency room if you're in the States, as you can do with the Horus Heresy book. So, you know, I actually think, you know, it is a good trade-off. And we've got our red border as before. Due to budget constraints, I've recycled the previous edition's red border, so I've kind of stuck this onto the front. So, you know, I've increased our efficiency by 100% there, so I'm proud of that. I'm all about process optimization. Right, that's enough faffing. Let's get into the discussion. Quite important information has been released in these 2 posts, and for me, actually, these are the most significant 2 official posts they've released so far, and if I were to put these 2 together, I would call these 2 the meta shift. The implications of these 2 are very substantial, and the consequences of them are going to be very significant in terms of how the game plays. The meta is going to move. Right, so let's start with large models, aka back to 1st edition. So vehicle profiles completely gone. All models now have, from a damage perspective, a strength, a toughness, and a save value. There are no facings for vehicles anymore, so that mechanic has been drop kicked out of the game. It's a bit of a shame because I liked armor facings, and it did actually, I think they got the game to quite a nice place in terms of reflecting how different vehicles had different degrees of protections on different facings. That said, am I overly sad to see it go? Well, I will miss that. Yeah, I will miss that. However, they've introduced some new mechanics in 8th, which is going to balance it out. And the fact that vehicles have an all-round toughness value, i.e. their strongest facing is also their weakest facing, isn't going to be a problem, I don't think, and we'll come on to that in the infantry section. Right, so no facings, super heavies gone, and gargantuan creatures are gone. So a whole great raft of rules have been neatly, you know, they've been given a pair of concrete shoes and dropped in the harbour. You know, they're gone, that's it, no more of those. That's going to strip out a huge amount of complicated rules, and everything is going to be rolled up in here. And there's something actually I missed saying here, which I should have put on, which is to say that wounds is the other common characteristic. Okay, and we're now going for a first, and we're going for a live update to the information whiteboard. It's a half recognisable W. There we go. So you saw it here first. So this makes things much more consistent and simple in terms of rules. And a lot of the reason that we had the rules around gargantuan creatures and super heavies was to deal with the fact of the limited gradational values you could have with the hull point system. There wasn't a lot in it between the weakest vehicle, let's say a skimmer with 2 hull points, and the toughest vehicle, a land raider with 4 hull points. There was not much room for manoeuvre there. It was only when you got into the really big super heavies that you actually had a decent amount of space to manoeuvre there. As I say, there are now lots of wounds to represent a vehicle's toughness. Now, we've had 3 examples here. We've had the Dreadnought, which has 8 wounds. That previously had 3 hull points. We had the Gorkanaut today, which has, if I can remember the numbers correctly through this wine, 18 wounds, whereas it previously had 5 hull points. And they also said that an Imperial Knight will have, quote, over 20 wounds, whereas it previously had 6 hull points. So roughly speaking, I'm calling that we're approximating 1 hull point in the old system is roughly equivalent to 3 wounds. Now they're going to use a toughness value and the save value to tweak that, but that seems to be from the three examples we've got, that is a rule of thumb. As vehicles take damage and they hit thresholds, they will lose effectiveness. So once they get to 50% or lower wounds, they will see a drop in effectiveness, and once they get to a quarter, they'll see a further drop in effectiveness. The example given, the Gorkanaut, sees a reduction in strength, movement and attacks values. They have stated, or G-Dubs has stated, that these reductions will vary according to the vehicle. So a much simplified system of damage. There's no longer any special damage table. Now what does this mean? Well, this has some really significant implications. So the first thing is there's no one-shot kills on most vehicles, I don't think. If we look at the example of the las cannon, which we know does d6 damage, if that shoots a dreadnought and inflicts damage, the dreadnought will take d6 wounds. The best it can do is reduce it down to 2 wounds. Previously, the best it could do was knock it out in one shot. And you could do it to even more extreme examples, to a land raid, for example. So the removal of the vehicle damage table makes vehicles or multi-wound creatures, so vehicles and gargantuan creatures, in theory tougher. Or to be honest, I think it overall makes vehicles tougher against anti-tank. It opens up new vulnerabilities against infantry weapons, but against anti-tank weapons, vehicles are going to be so much more solid. Monstrous creatures, well, they've been milking the system for the last few editions, so I think they're fine. Right, moving on to the second part of the second post we had today, so the infantry post. Squads are now allowed to shoot at multiple targets. This is an absolutely fantastic change in the rules, and it reverses one of the most idiotic, that's right Games Workshop, idiotic simplifications, simplistic, annoying simplifications you ever put into the game, which was preventing units from shooting the right weapon at the right target. If you've ever seen any film of real soldiers fighting in combat, you know that they know how to shoot the right weapon at the right target. You know, if a tank starts coming towards them, they will use their anti-tank weapon against that tank, and the infantry will continue to attack enemy infantry who are in sight. Believe me. They've not said exactly how this is working, but they've certainly said you can fire your anti-tank weapons, e.g. your missile launcher, at a tank target or a vehicle target or a monstrous creatures, whereas you fire your bolters at a separate unit, which might be a bunch of enemy infantry. Fantastic, brilliant decision. Very happy with that. Much, much more realistic. The next thing in the infantry part, and to be honest, this whole section is really to do with damage. It's not really to do with large models or infantry. It's all to do with damage mechanics. There is a new damage system. So if we just recap, G-Dubs has told us previously there is going to be no cap on strength and no cap on toughness values. In theory, you could have a toughness 20 and a strength 25 weapon. Everything is now vulnerable to damage from attack by everything else. So they've gone from this lasguns are flashlights to saying lasguns might actually blow a hole in your Land Raider or do it some damage. A lasgun might actually do some damage to a Warlord Titan. That's right, a Warlord Titan, because everything is now vulnerable. Now, a Warlord Titan is probably going to have somewhere between 90 and 100 wounds in the new system, and void shields, and heavy armor. So that vulnerability to all these lasguns isn't that great. But I love this because this is one of the things I've always, one of my favorite games, Battletech, I've always liked about it, is the fact that the weakest unit could always destroy the strongest unit in a single attack. Now, this isn't quite that, and there are good reasons for it, but the very fact that your guardsmen with lasguns can now damage a Warlord Titan, fantastic. Well, maybe I'm overstating that a bit, but certainly your lasguns are going to be able to damage a heavy tank like a Land Raider. And the way this works is as follows. So if your strength is greater than or equal to the toughness times 2, you're going to wound on a 2+. Strength is greater than toughness, you wound on a 3+. Strength equals toughness is a wound on a 4+. Strength is less than toughness, wound on a 5+. And if strength times 2 is less than or equal to the toughness, you wound on a 6. That mechanic replaces the old relativistic damage table, although you didn't need a table, because in theory what they've done is they've just written out almost in mathematical shorthand a kind of formula similar to the old system, although they have changed how the fine detail of the mechanics works, and they've removed the limitation where weapons could only damage targets with a maximum of 3 points toughness higher than them, i.e. a bolter with strength 4 could damage a maximum toughness of toughness 7. So that is gone now. So this is and when I say the meta is moving, this is a huge change. So vehicles are going to have loads of wounds compared to their current hull points. However, they're going to be vulnerable to every single ranged weapon on the battlefield. I can't wait for my Solar Auxilia to get the 8th edition treatment, because they're just going to be awesome with being able to fire their huge number of lasgun shots at long range and wear down vehicles. I suspect they're going to get tweaked. But anyway, that's a little pipe dream on my part. Very exciting, this one. A huge change in the meta. Do I like it? Ooh, right, well here we get to the controversial bit. Do I like it? Despite the fact we're losing armor facing values, which I liked and was realistic, I like the overall effect of this whole piece. I really like how infantry are now much more effective. I also like how vehicles are no longer one-shottable. I expect we are going to see the cost of vehicles increase relative to the current edition. Taking us back to first edition and the chapter approved rules, I'd just like to remind you that back then you would pay 250 points for Space Marine Tactical Squad, similar price to what you pay in current edition once you bought heavy weapons, etc. However, a Land Raider would cost 750 points back in the chapter approved era of first edition. So, and at the moment you play, you know, Land Raiders are about 250, or even less in the Horus Heresy, where you can get them as cheap as 180. I suspect we are going to see the cost of the Land Raiders go up. I like all the principles here. It's going to be a huge shift in meta, and it's going to need rebalancing carefully. I think this will play out better in the Horus Heresy in terms of infantry versus vehicles, because there is such good availability to infantry heavy weapons in the Horus Heresy. Space Marine Legion heavy support squads, and in particular tactical support squads, are going to really come into their own now. Can you imagine rotor cannons buzzing away at Land Raiders and grinding them down gradually? I like that. Anyway, so radical stuff, this, without a doubt, radical stuff. Although, as I say, back to first edition. Let me know what you think about these significant changes of the meta. For me, this is the most significant change by far that we've seen on 8th edition, and from what GW has shared on their Warhammer Community post. So very interested to hear your opinions. I think the next post is going to be on characters, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.